Hi, I'm Kate Caravella with Breaking Forward Coaching, and this joining me today is my good friend Erin Grupp and my colleague of over 10 years. And Erin is a licensed psychotherapist in the Tampa Bay, Florida area, and somebody who I admire tremendously and have a lot of respect for. And she's an excellent, excellent therapist. Erin, would you do the honors of just sharing a little bit more about your background, about your practice, about what you specialize in, what you do?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I always love collaborating with you and your company. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a certified addiction professional. My husband and I have a counseling practice called Catalyst Center for Change, as you said, in Tampa. We do all kinds of all kinds of work with we're both certified sex therapists, sex addiction therapists. We do addictions, process addictions, eating disorders, because we find a lot of those things intertwine. So we do treat anxiety and depression, but also how all of those things, then where they come from and how they manifest problematically in people's day-to-day lives. And then we do that through a number of modalities, experiential ones like psychodrama and rapid resolution therapy, and then also more cognitively based ones like CBT and DBT, and sort of draw from those different modalities to get the most effective results.
And I know something that I know about you is that if you had an addiction, right, yours is training and different certifications, and people often ask me, what is the difference between Eric Grupp and this other therapist, right? And when we talk about just all the trainings, all the specialties that you use, can you tell us a little bit more just about that? I mean, you kind of covered it in terms of what you do.
Yeah, sure. And it's interesting. I was just sort of joking. Whoops, sorry, my computer there. I was sort of joking with you, right? That I have so many trainings and certifications because I think that um, for me, what it's like finding different lenses that work for different people. And so, trying on different ways of working with the brain to really get and facilitate the shifts that are going to make the difference, right? So being trained in both the content areas, I think, matters, right? Like, to be able to specifically work with sex addiction, you have to understand the inner workings of that. But then there's also the modalities of, well, how do you work with it? Like, what kinds of homework assignments do you do? What do you do in session? Talk about it, but also how do you get in deeper to the origins and things of that nature? Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And one of the things that you also do is because I've referred to you for these are intensives, like specifically
Yes.
designed intensives for people, for a variety of reasons, whether they just need a tune up or they are sort of stuck and need something
Yeah.
a little bit more.
That's glad you brought that up. One of the things, so um one of the ways that Scott, my husband, and I work is that we do a lot of, like, we're very open in terms of the structure of the therapy. So some people come once a week, some people come twice a week, some people come once a month, and then, come 6 months later for a tune up, because we have these different types of modalities. And something that we do find that's really effective is an initial intensive, and then followed by either like a 1 day or a half day follow up, 3 months, 6 months down the line, and or a period of time that's ongoing. It's often like almost like 6 months worth of therapy that happens because it's this very specific construct, right? It's
Mhm.
this setting where we can do a deep dive in and really get through all those layers to the heart of things. And then you leave with plan of what to do daily, weekly, monthly, and how to keep that sort of change up, and what to do to, make it last.
And to keep it consistent.
Yes.
I'm so
And
glad
we
that you
can,
do
and
that.
then, and then
A lot of
content
people
wise,
don't. Mhm.
well, you're right. And I was just going to say, right, because some people are like, well, you do like sex addiction. It's like, yes. And also just mild anxiety, right? Because it doesn't have to be like there's so many ways that these things manifest in our day-to-day lives that doing a deep dive and can sort of come in and clear out
Mhm.
the baggage that keeps people stuck.
Absolutely. So, and those intensives are, I mean, time intensive for you as well. I mean, you're literally most times, right? You're doing them on a
Yep.
weekend. Brings me to my next question. One of the tracks that Breaking Forward Coaching has is this life balance track, right?
Yes.
This career and the career and the life, and how do you have those both of those things? Which, so when I was thinking about who I could interview specific to this type of coaching situation, I thought of you. Yeah, I thought of you, but I thought of you, primarily because you, in addition to having a thriving practice and being incredibly busy and, working a lot, you also have a large number of children and a husband and a family in different parts of the country, and you travel and you have social commitments, and you've reignited your passion for gymnastics and have competed. So yeah, how do you do that, or how have you done it?
Uh,
Like yeah, tell us about that a little bit too, because
that's a
that's
great question. I think, um, you know, yeah, just having four kids, period, is a lot. And then you add in, a career on top of it, it's a lot. And I mean, for me, it's really been about learning how to allocate time, right? And I think this is one of the ways in which coaching can be really, really effective, is to uh, well, to help achieve the balance, right? So you mentioned gymnastics. That is something that I do. And I like to think of, achieving work like life balance almost through a metaphor of it's not this perfect um, percentage of formula that you're going
right.
to achieve, and then everything is just balanced from here on out, right?
I mean, it'd be
It
nice,
reminds well,
but
yeah, that would be wonderful. But what's more realistic is like I think of someone learning how to do a handstand, right? And say you watch someone who's in a high level performer and they can hold a handstand for a really long time as opposed to a beginner who's just starting out. Well, even when someone's holding the handstand, they aren't just in this perfect balance. What's actually happening is you're noticing when you're going too far this way, and then you have developed the skills to bring yourself back here, and then you notice when you start to go too far this way, and you have the learned the skills to bring yourself back up here. Like which
you realize I'm
muscles
going
do
to
you
hijack that, right? As an example and as an analogy, going
just give
forward
me
from it.
credit and it'll
So
be
yeah,
okay.
so footnote, citation,
That,
Erin Grupp, and Sam's
but that's
balance.
that's really how I see it, is this ongoing not having arrived at balance, but this ongoing awareness of what is too far that I'm going to fall. Where, and then where, at what point do I need to pull back, and what do I need to do that? And then also how, like how do I do that?
Mhm.
And, while those things can absolutely be, learned in therapy, um, in, you know, coaching is so helpful in my opinion and experience because it's very specific, right? It's almost laser focused, right? It's like, oh, okay, as a therapy, to go with this metaphor, right? As a therapist, my therapist and I have identified that I keep doing this, and then I keep falling over, and here's the pattern, and we're working on why that started happening and where it developed and what happens in my life when I do that. And we maybe even identified how to recognize at what point I need to do something different. But I can't. I need accountability, right? I need someone to come in and help me set up a structure so that I can hone in on that. And then over the period of a specific amount of time, we see an actual shift. And I think that's where the coaching can be really, really beneficial.
Absolutely, because that is something, for using that metaphor and using that example, that's what clients are seeking coaching for,
Yeah.
right? There, I mean, there's a lot of things people can be coached on, right?
Yep.
And sometimes too, it's not even just I want to learn how to do and hold a handstand. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I do that. I could do the handstand, right? And I'd like to extend my body out a little bit further. I'd like to,
Yeah.
so it's not
Yeah, like
necessarily,
maybe there's
oh, I
not
don't
even
know.
a problem. It's like I just want to become even more skillful, right? I want to
Yes.
become even better, even more masterful. And I think a lot of areas where coaching and therapy can overlap, but I see it sort of like a Venn diagram where, in the middle, they they do overlap, but there is a really useful role that both of them hold that's distinct,
Yes.
and so, for example, I know when I'm working with someone, if we're doing a lot of sessions together and we're like, say, perhaps on the cusp of making some really big breakthroughs, but, each session, I'm just going to use an example that comes to mind of someone I worked with that I referred to coaching to you. But each session, she would come to session like disorganized and I'm okay with that. I'm not judging it, but she was frustrated because she didn't have all of her stuff. She hadn't put together what she wanted to work on. She couldn't find her phone. She couldn't find the homework that she'd done. And so um it was like, well, what if we work on you doing that with the coach, getting organized, figuring out how to do time management and work on those executive functioning skills, and then we can come to therapy and be able to dive right in, right? Go into perhaps the deeper stuff.
Well, and I think, you really just described it's like that holding space for different things.
Yeah.
Right. And, it's obviously our relationship, breaking forward and coaching for me is a newer thing. But, my role as a clinical care manager, you and I have collaborated on cases professionally for over a decade at this point.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the reasons why our clients, when we work together in that way, really it's so beneficial for them because we're just holding different spaces. And as
Yes.
long as you and I collaborate so that, we're making
Yes.
sure that, we're not inadvertently getting too close to the middle and
Mm-hmm.
we're keeping that space, I think that gives, because like a lot of people will say to me, like, well, I don't, I'm doing coaching but I don't need a therapist. And, some people don't, right? But some people really
Right.
do, right? And to be
Right.
able to really parse that out and know which space am I going to hold for you right now?
Exactly. And some people will say to me, right, well, is it too many cooks in the kitchen? And it's like, well, right, it's individual. It could be,
Right.
but my experience is that in a lot of cases, it likely isn't, right? As long as we're communicating, we have the same intention, the same desire, the same, where we're headed.
Right.
And then what happens in my experience is the coaching clears up obstacles to be able to make really much deeper, faster progress in therapy. And then vice versa, the
Right. The flip
therapy,
side of that, it's, yep.
right, clears up the stuff that would come up as an obstacle in coaching. I had a client who was doing coaching, and every time she was in her coaching session, she would just break down into tears, right? And
Right.
couldn't do the things that she and her coach were trying to get working on. So we
Yes.
had to work on that therapeutically, which then cleared up
Right.
obstacles for her to be able to make progress on the goals in the coaching arena.
Absolutely. So you personally have seen the benefit of, I mean, professionally have seen the benefit of working with your clients and with that person working with the coach and that
Hmm.
collaboration. And then you yourself did coaching for balance
Hmm.
purposes and life coaching. And so you started to say that one of the things that you sought that for was that time allocation.
Balance. Yes, yes. So if I personally believe that, therapists need therapists. So I've done my fair share of therapy as well, and also coaching. And exactly for that reason, why did I personally seek out a coach instead of a therapist? And it was for sort of that laser like focus of like, I've done so much work, I know why, I know how, and like somebody
It's
like
not translating the way.
help me translate it, help me integrate these realizations and insights and awarenesses into, hit the ground running. How do I do? And so for me, it was a lot of it was about creating pockets of time, right? So really looking at like the different areas of my life as, interconnected but separate,
Right.
so that, before a lot of things were blending over, I have so many balls in the air, but it would be like, well, I don't know, which one do I look at now? And, I'd stay too late at work, and then I'd feel guilty because I'd be, not present for certain things with the kids. And, everything just felt chaotic and all over the place. And coaching really helped me almost create, I don't know, the boundaries is the right word, but almost like it feels like these little, like, distinct
Like a
pockets.
pocket. Yeah, the pocket.
Yeah,
Yes.
like, okay, so, and here's the work pocket. And that doesn't mean it has to be when I'm at my office at work, but how to sort of section it off in my mind so that then when I'm with the kids, I'm fully present with the kids, right? When I'm with this client, I'm fully present with this client. When, oh, I have these calls to return, that doesn't have to take up all my headspace running in the background, because I'm clear that I have a pocket of time that's allocated to returning those calls, and they're going to get done, but I don't need to think about it when I'm not doing it. And all of
One
that,
of
of course, is easier said than done, but I think with the accountability, it helps.
well,
Go on.
and one of the things that comes to mind too is, I think people who are generally very good multitaskers, right? Just people in
Mhm.
general. I'm not one of them, by the way. Like, like I have a very, very difficult time pivoting from like
Yeah.
this particular mode to this particular mode.
Yeah.
Like, and I know like a lot of people do have that. So people I think who are multitaskers may find it a little bit more difficult for this time allocation and time investment
Mhm.
be able to do that because they are so used to that, leaving, like, okay, I have an hour driving home, right? So I
Right.
can catch up with mom right now, or I could give it my, colleague an update, or I could return this phone call right now. And you're just missing a lot of moments too, right? I
Yeah.
mean, just so I would imagine that for somebody who does multitask well, like you do, carving out those pockets and feeling
Yes.
comfortable with that, right? Because
And
that's
being
so,
and being intentional about it, I think,
yes,
too, because
yes,
I mean, on one hand, I've always carved out the moments. That's how I multitask. But being like, okay, now is the time for this, right? And later, this time is the time for that, and this time is the time for that. And then having someone else, help me zoom out and be like, okay, like, and we've now not taken care of it all, but addressed all of the things so
right,
that when you're not doing the thing, you don't have to be thinking about the thing. And that in and of itself is a huge way to reduce anxiety. But just talking about that isn't going to reduce the anxiety. It's having
right.
someone help you implement it and put it into place.
Right. And when you were doing coaching, was there heavy emphasis on accountability as well? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
well, I think it can be so some people love that word, some people hate it, right? I think so, yes, for me, because it was helpful, right? We can call it whatever, in my
right,
opinion, we can call
right,
it whatever you want, but it's having somebody who's alongside of you, right? But not judging you if you don't do it. It's
right,
like, oh, if it doesn't work, well, we're just gonna play with why not,
right.
right? And figure out what, and therapy's a lot like that too. A lot of my style of therapy is, well, if this isn't working, let's play with what can work.
Hmm.
And so then the coaching aspect, it doesn't feel like, someone, like the carrot and the stick with like a stick,
Right,
like, you've got to
right.
do this, right? But it's like, it's almost like a, I don't know, a personal trainer, right? Like,
Hmm.
you know, so you already know how to do the exercises, but because you go and or after they teach you, how, but then
Hmm.
you go and somebody's there showing you nuances, helping you to figure it out and apply it. And
Right.
then I think that application
Yes.
in the day-to-day life, is really helpful. It helped me. And that's also one of the reasons why I would also refer a therapy client for coaching is, like, between sessions we can't get traction, right? And
Right.
coaching really helps get traction between
That's
sessions.
that's a really, really, really good way of putting it too. And again, it's like that holding space, right? Like if
Right.
you have a client, and let's say your client is having challenges, at work in terms of, communication with their team, right? And they're feeling really, really uncomfortable. They don't feel like they're doing a good job. They're maybe even getting feedback from their supervisor. You could spend a lot of time, like, it's obviously a clinical issue that you want to address. But if that same person is also going through a divorce and has postpartum depression
Yes.
and is trying to get their depression manageable, and they're financially struggling, you can't,
Yes.
how
It's
much
like
can you do in a 15 minutes?
too many balls to juggle in
Right,
one in the
right.
therapeutic session. So let's break it out and get the things that can be done, that can be actionable and specific and measured and
And in that
tracked.
specific situation, as for as an example, coaching. So we don't do life coaching. We do professional executive business coaching.
Yep.
But life, I mean, listen, that's part of our life, right? In fact, we spend how much time in our life do we spend working and being in our career? But so like in that example that we just talked about, our focus would be, okay, you're experiencing this at work, right? So as it relates to your professional
Well,
functioning.
you made me think of something that's also right, like because of working with especially high level professionals, right? Like there's off, there's often a gap between like the really beneficial work that's happening in therapy and then how do we translate that over into a fast-paced high-powered work environment where you don't have a lot of people sitting around looking to just validate your feelings and oh, you're doing a really good job. It's like how do you shift over into that?
Yes. I think that's one of the most valuable pieces too. Of all the different tracks that we have, we have the ADD professional coaching track, right? And then we have the transitional track, and that's really geared for people who are just going through a transition. And initially, when we were formulating that track focus, it was for a lot of people who are mid-career and are saying, I think I want to do something else. But what is that? Or people who are recently retired, or people who are
Right.
considering retirement. But then it really kind of gained a little bit more traction in the sense of, it can really be anybody who's going through a transition, and things
Because
at
there's
work
so
are
many
going to be,
similarities in a transition that can become
yes,
obstacles if we don't have somebody by our side helping us along the way.
absolutely. And like even people who maybe they've been a stay-at-home parent, for
Hmm.
X amount of years, and now they're going back, and things are different, and there's different techniques, and so yeah, just walking them through that piece of things. But even people, I guess one of the things that comes to mind, and this is just from some of the clients that you and I have worked together on so many times in the past decade, people who are coming out of treatment, say for mental health or substance use recovery, right? And
Yeah.
they have to go back to work, and
Yeah.
they can't not work, but they
Right.
also need to balance and transition with and stay focused. And
Yep.
and they'll say to me, well, I have a therapist, or I have an IOP, or I have a sponsor, and all of those things are great. And yes, you want to keep all those things because all of those things are what's going to keep you. But yet, we need to talk about when you're going to go
And
back
how do you
and what,
become your best self at work, right? How do you
right,
take your recovery into the work environment? Because it's separate, but it's also not separate. And so someone being that bridge.
absolutely. Yep. So yeah, there's the ADD track and the transitional track, like balance track that we talked about. There's a leadership track, and that's for high level executives that manage. And with that, we don't necessarily find that they're seeking coaching because there's a problem per se,
Right.
right? They just want to be a little bit, they just want to hone their skill set, enhance it.
Yep. Become more masterful.
Yes. And then there's another one that I'm forgetting. What am I forgetting? Oh, productivity.
Right.
And the productivity is for people who are in those careers and those professions where there's a lot of emphasis on numbers and having to meet quotas and having these things where it requires them to be productive, sustain a high level of productivity on a regular basis, which that's not always easy, at least for
Right.
not for me.
Well, and again, right. And to make it sustainable, what needs to be put in place, right?
Right.
Because a lot of times people will, or my experience is that I'll find people who got into those types of fields out the gate running, and it matches their personality, but then over time there's almost like a burnout or like a fear of burning out because it's not sustainable long term.
Yes.
But it isn't that it couldn't be sustainable, it's just they haven't learned the different pieces to put in place to make it be sustainable.
And how to pivot, right? If something changes, right? I mean, like
Exactly.
if you get the flu and you're out of
Right.
account for the week, right? You are not going to be as productive. I mean, most people aren't,
Right.
and so how do you pivot that? Because if you don't
Right.
pivot that, then you have two choices. You either push yourself and continue to work and stay sick, right? Or you sit in bed and you feel terrible about the fact that you're not producing. right? And so how can
Right.
you pivot that mindset?
I literally was just telling a client earlier this morning, listen to your body when it whispers so you don't have to hear it scream.
Yeah.
And, right, if you don't make time to rest, your body is going to make
Thank you.
you make time to
Yeah.
rest.
Like
But that
that's
doesn't seem, and I think it's not like people have never heard that before, but
right.
how?
Right.
How, right?
That's
How do you do it when you have, four kids and a career and et cetera, et cetera? How do you do it when you're, in every other, fast-paced, high pressure, whatever environment, whatever every life has, right? How do you do it?
right. Exactly. And I think that's really where the coaching part focuses on. So,
Yeah.
when
And I love when my therapy clients are working with a coach because I feel for me, it feels like we've just like added wheels. Like it's like, okay, I can breathe now, but almost like I feel like there's another container that making sure that things are going in these other directions that are super important for the person because if the career falls apart,
right.
right, then we've got so many more
Or,
therapeutic issues,
right,
right? So
right.
it's like I'm like, okay, great, this is taken care of and now we can, it's like clear so we can focus on what we really want to focus
Or
on,
focus on.
right? And like we said before, vice
Well, and
versa.
then
Repeat
so then the
myself.
client is aware, like, okay, this is I can hold this because I've got a coaching session with Kate next week,
Right.
right? And
Right. I don't have to. I've got it
right,
coming up, but oh wait, there's a pocket for that.
right,
Right?
yes,
Not if I don't talk about it right now, it's never
no,
going to get addressed. And therefore we end up talking about that instead of,
yes,
the frozen grief or something of
yes,
that nature.
absolutely. So again, right, my coaching is very similar to what I've been doing for right like 30 years, the clinical care management. The difference being that with coaching, there's a start, there's a middle, there's an end.
Hmm.
It's like you said, laser focused. Um, it's 12 sessions. It's
Hmm.
fast paced. There's a lot of, the other thing that I wanted to mention too is um, one of our coaches, one of our partners is Dr. Duan Sheehan, who specializes in psychometric testing. So because she is part of the coaching team, we're able to, and what does happen with every coaching client that we have, it's kind of baked into the overall cost of it. They're getting psychometric assessments. So some is, exploring career interest. We're not talking about stuff we could just like pull off the internet. We're talking
Right.
about things that comes with in-depth report that we could really use
Yeah.
to kind of gain insight and laser focus there as well. So that's been like a really,
Well,
it's
and
been a
that's
really
also
useful.
helpful. And that's helpful too, because that can also then augment the therapy process, right? That
Yes.
can, you know, like that can bring awareness and words to certain areas that people may have been struggling with, but didn't know how to articulate it. And then
Absolutely.
we can decide, how to look at it, how to incorporate working on that stuff too.
Yeah, so it's been really cool. And Erin, I thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you
Absolutely.
time pocketed this for me because I really appreciate it. And it was really helpful. And listen, I of all the people that I know that would, that have so much going on in their life, you truly do. I mean,
I
you
do.
truly do. You do. You
I
really do.
really do.
I mean, and I know this, right? Because I know, and but on the surface, it always looks like you've got it very well together.
The
So
duck with the feet running underneath.
so there's that. Even if sometimes I have had to lend you my shoes because you forgot to bring their shoes.
I still keep your shoes at my office in a cabinet for the days that I accidentally wear my slippers to work.
Because sometimes that just happens. And you know what? You're pivoting and just going with it, being like, I've got that extra pair. Is this a good thing that we wear the same size? I thank you so much for your time. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Thank you
Absolutely.
for
And I'm
joining us.
grateful that you guys exist and do what you do and are helping people in the way that you do. And I love collaborating with you and the team.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.